Welcome to the Vault Excel. Thank you for your time. Happy weekend, everyone. Please be safe and please stay hydrated. This is a two-part live pertaining to a law passed by the Supreme Court that domestic abusers will not be able to own a handgun, guns. And the next topic will be a new law passed in Louisiana pertaining to the Ten Commandments. It will be allowed in public schoolrooms, the Ten Commandments, in the state of Louisiana. Also, we will take a deep dive into the law itself, should it be passed in other jurisdictions in the United States. Two-part live. Abusers with guns and the Ten Commandments allowed in Louisiana classrooms. Join me later tonight for in-depth discussion pertaining to the case of Sebastian Rogers. We will take a deep dive into the commentary from Tony Mathis during that interview with Banfield. What information does law enforcement have? Sumner County Sheriff's Department. Are there any closer to answers versus what they had in the beginning of the investigation? And the second part of that live, we're going to take a deep dive into the child Faith. Was she the reason, the motivation for the Proudfoots to unalive Sebastian Rogers? Many people had different commentary last night during my live pertaining to a motive of getting rid of the child. As I've said before, I believe the mother checked out a long time ago. Don't know exactly when, before birth, during birth, after birth, but I do believe most definitely after birth she checked out, Katie Proudfoot. That will be tonight's live, which will be number 2. Let's get down to business, everybody. MSNBC is my first source.
That gun case we were just talking about moments ago, again, questioning whether somebody who is a domestic violence abuser and has a restraining order against them should have access to a gun and can legally have access to a gun. Lisa, we were just talking about this. I know you're quickly trying to get to the bottom line of what the decision is. Do you have that answer?
I do. I don't necessarily have the division, but the holding of the decision is when an individual, and I'm reading to you from the front page of the decision, when an individual has been found by a court to pose a credible threat to the physical safety of another, that individual may be temporarily disarmed, consistent with the Second Amendment. That is an upholding of that federal statute. That is, as I was just speculating with you, where this was headed. And based on the oral arguments in this case, many legal observers believed that a majority of the court would uphold the statute. They didn't understand necessarily who that majority was going to be. I will tell you that this is a difficult decision to parse in terms of the number of, we were talking earlier about the number of pages, the number of concurrences. Chief Justice Roberts wrote the decision for the court, and it has 7 other justices joining it. It is an 8-1 decision on it. There are some concurrences, and the only dissenting justice is Justice Clarence Thomas today in the Rahimi decision. So I'm going to spend some time trying to parse this. I did want to talk a little bit, if we could, for a moment, about the Manhattan DA and their brief today with respect to the gag order.
Let's hit pause on that and try to circle back, because I want to dig into this Rahimi decision and give you a second also to take a look at that. And let me get to Yamiche Alcindor, who is also looking through this decision right now. Yamiche, what stands out to you?
What stands out is that the Supreme Court is saying here that if you are found in violation of a domestic violence law, that you can't have temporarily your rights to guns be taken away from you. And that's really important in this case, because the government was essentially arguing that if you are someone who's a threat to someone and been found to credibly have violated laws, that you should not be allowed to have guns. I also think it's important to put this into context. It was in 2022 that the Supreme Court for the first time found that you had a right to bear arms outside of your house, which meant that there were a lot of questions about whether or not other kinds of laws that were restricting people's access to guns related to domestic violence, related to other sort of breaking laws, whether or not those laws would be in some ways come into question here. And the Supreme Court here is standing on that and saying absolutely, in this case, domestic abuse violators have the ability to get their guns taken away. I also think it's important to point out that this is an 8-1 decision. We talk a lot about the fact that this is a 6-3 conservative majority court, but here you're seeing a decision that's written by Chief Justice Roberts, and the liberals and conservatives, other than Justice Clarence Thomas, are all finding that they agree on this issue. So it is, I think, striking to see sort of the split, a split that we don't often see, which is an 8-1 split.
8-1 split. How interesting. 8-1. New Supreme Court law. Let's do a little digging. Thank you for joining me. Hope you all are well. Thank you. Hello, Pinto, Adora, Shelly. CNN is the source of this information. The Supreme Court upheld a federal law Friday that bars guns for domestic abusers, rejecting an argument pressed by gun rights groups that the prohibition violated the Second Amendment. How? You're a threat to society. Are you serious? So some of you believe you should still have a gun. These people should still have a gun. So it should only affect what? You? When it's your turn or your family member is being stalked or has a restraining order? This country is so ridiculous. The 8-1 decision in one of the court's most closely watched cases limited the scope of a blockbuster ruling the justices handed down 2 years ago that prompted a flood of legal challenges to other gun laws across the nation. The decision, which placed most of the court's conservatives and liberals on the same side, could help shore up similar federal gun regulations that have been challenged since the Supreme Court vastly expanded gun rights in 2022, at least in situations where a criminal defendant is considered dangerous. That court's 2022 ruling caused substantial confusion for lower court judges viewing Second Amendment lawsuits. Chief Justice John Roberts, writing for the majority, said the court had no trouble coalescing around the idea that an individual who poses a threat can be denied access to weapons. Our tradition of firearm regulation allows the government to disarm individuals who present a credible threat to physical safety of others, Roberts wrote. The Chief Justice pushed back on the idea that his decision 2 years ago in New York State Rifle and Pistol Association versus Bruin had hemlocked lower courts into striking down any gun law that didn't have a direct historic analog. Roberts said that some lower courts had misunderstood the methodology of our decent Second Amendment cases. The court's ruling today leaves intact a specific federal criminal prohibition on gun possession by those subject to domestic violence-related restraining orders. Okay? Said Steve Vladeck, CNN Supreme Court analyst and professor at the University of Texas School of Law, But there are dozens of other federal and state gun regulations that have been challenged since the court's 2022 ruling in the Bruin case. The harder cases, like whether Congress can prohibit all felons or all drug offenders from possessing firearms, are still to come. Several of those cases are already pending at the Supreme Court and could be granted in coming days. Justice Clarence Thomas, who wrote the majority opinion in Bruin, authored a lone dissent on Friday. The court and government do not point to a single historical law revoking a citizen's Second Amendment right based on possible interpersonal violence, Thomas wrote. Yet in the interest of ensuring the government can regulate one subset of society, today's decision puts at risk the Second Amendment rights of many more. Well, I'm just going to say this. It's still a problem if it's only going to affect if a person has a restraining order against a person, okay? Because what about a person who doesn't have a restraining order and the man don't take a restraining order on that person, but they've been hurt, beat up, Their home has been vandalized. Family, friends' homes been vandalized. There's proof that the person has done it, and they are still allowed to walk around with a gun or guns. Because we've seen this happen so many times where the person, the victim, will not prosecute or press charges. They go out, fill the report, but they don't follow through. Now, a lot of states will prosecute the person on its own. The district attorney will file the paperwork on the state's own behalf. But how is this going to affect that person as far as still owning the right to have a gun? So, see, this is a problem. If it's only going to apply to restraining orders of the said person. Because we know that, as I just said, many women and men do not get restraining orders. So that means that perpetrator will still be wandering around the streets with access to a gun, whether he is a felon or not a felon. And yes, that is state law. You cannot be a felon in the possession of a firearm. But once again, it's neither here nor there. They find a way to get the gun, felon or not. And you see that all the time with street violence. People having access to guns, picking up guns, sold guns, stealing guns, and they're either a felon or not a felon. So one of our problems is the access to firearms, legally and illegally. That's number one. Now you have this law only applying to domestic abusers with restraining orders, victims with restraining orders. That needs, they didn't word that properly. It needs to be if you've been accused and proof shown, you have beat up someone, hurt someone, stabbed someone, pushed someone, grabbed hair, kidnapping, however you word it, you cannot have a gun. If there is proof, adamant proof, it should not just apply to a person who has a restraining order against him or her. And that's my take on that. Thank you for joining me. Now, next subject pertaining to this new Louisiana law. Lord have mercy, what a mess. Also, I want to let you know that Megan Boswell, who has been accused of murdering her girl child, Evelyn, 4 years ago, she has pled not guilty to the said charges. Her charges are now at a 20 count total against her. Thought I'd let you all know that. I'm trying to find my content and I don't see what I'm looking for. All right, everybody. Can't seem to find my content. 1 second, everybody. Thank you for joining me. CNN is the source of that information if you need verification. That's why it's best to always read everything, because I had a feeling there was going to be a stipulation pertaining to that Supreme Court law. I should have known better. Should have known better. Well, I had my information here. Somehow it's disappeared. Well, now. Hello, Luminous. Thank you. Biscuits and Gravy. Hello. Thank you for joining us. One second, everybody, while I load this information up. Queen has been so busy bringing out certain shorts. Please go to YouTube Q to check out my shorts. I have quite a few. May play some of them during this live stream in case some of you are not in tune to the Queen shorts. This is for those who don't like long-winded live streams. You get 15 seconds of the Queen's commentary. Well, it's amazing how I gather things. I have things stored in so many places. It's like ridiculous. Okay. 1 second, everybody.
These days, everyone's staring at a screen.
All right. I found it. Thank you for joining me. Feel free to comment on that post in the YouTube queue pertaining to this in new information.
44 past the hour, the ACLU and other civil liberties groups say they plan to sue Louisiana over the state's controversial new 10 Commandments law. Now, it requires the 10 Commandments be displayed in every public school classroom. The religious text will be poster-sized with large readable font in classrooms from kindergarten to state-funded universities.
Wow, universities, wow.
And former Broward County Assistant State Attorney Maria Schneider. So, Marisa, this is raising some questions about the separation of church and state. So, what is happening and what comes next?
Right. Well, what comes next is most likely those lawsuits we talked about. And I actually just spoke with the ACLU, and they said that they intend to file sometime next week. So, of course, we'll keep a close eye on that. But that is something that everyone who is a supporter of this, including the governor, has said that they knew would be coming. And in fact, he welcomes. He just signed this yesterday, saying, but it was just this past weekend that he said he looks forward to being sued. And so what we're hearing, of course, is two sides of discourse. The supporters saying that this isn't a religious effort, that this is meant to be a display of moral code of conduct, if you will. The Attorney General of Louisiana pointed to the fact that Moses is depicted within the halls of the Supreme Court 8 different times, saying that she looks forward to, quote, defending the law. But we have critics saying, well, wait a second, what about separation of church and state? And so you have groups like the ACLU who are vowing to sue. And I want to point to a National Education Association. The president put out a statement in part saying that this is religious coercion. They're afraid that this will make students feel like they are being coerced into one specific type of religion. You mentioned again that this will and is supposed to be displayed in all publicly funded classrooms from kindergarten all the way through university schools, we'll say. So in terms of timeline, in terms of what happens next, of course, those lawsuits are expected to be filed sometime next week, but according to the legislation that was just signed by the governor, the deadline for this to be displayed in those classrooms is 2025, Jose.
And so, Maria, this challenge is in Louisiana argues that the 10 Commandments are not just religious, but they're also, they have a historical aspect to it. How do you see these lawsuits playing out? I mean, what would these lawsuits, you think, be based on?
Well, the lawsuits are definitely going to be based on the separation of church and state, the Establishment Clause. But I see that one of the reasons why the governor is so willing to enter into this fight is because he's counting on the Supreme Court, which has, historically, the recent Supreme Court been a lot more supportive of lowering the bar between the separation of church and state. They've made a lot of rulings. There have been a lot of rulings. I think I read something that says 85% of religious cases have come before the current Supreme Court have ended up on the side of the challenger. So that's a pretty significant, increase from what it had been in the past, which was in the 30s. I think the 40 percentile was the highest that you'd ever seen these types of decisions go on the side of the people who wanted to kind of blur that line between church and state.
And talk to me about that 1980 U.S. Supreme Court ruling of that Kentucky law.
Mm-hmm. Well, there have been a couple of rulings. It hasn't just been one. I mean, going back all the way to what they call the Lemon Law from 1947 and a series of other decisions afterwards that have kind of lessened. They've allowed, they allowed, in God we trust is all over the place in, our money and our, oaths and all kinds of things. So there has been a separation, but that has been blurred over time. I think that what we're going to end up seeing is challenges based on whether this is really truly a historical movement. They're trying to expose children to something that has existed historically, or if this is really a push on religion. I mean, if we're really going to go historical, what about the Code of Hammurabi? That predates, the 10 Commandments. Obviously, it includes a lot of ridiculous things. Hammurabi basically killed everybody for every reason. But it also encompasses some of the basics that are contained within the 10 Commandments. I don't have a problem with the idea that thou shalt not kill. That's in our laws. we can teach that. There is no prohibition. It's when you put that context of Moses said it, and you shall have no God before me, and those things that we get into that area where it really starts to blur the line between church and state.
And Marisa, this is something other states are clearly looking at.
Absolutely, and of course we talked about the precedent that was set in 1980 with the Supreme Court, and that is something that the ACLU and other groups are saying that this new legislation just signed by the governor violates the precedent that was set, but the Supreme Court had a completely different makeup then, and so we know right now this is a conservative leaning Supreme Court, so I think there's a lot of states that have pending legislation in different parts of, whether they've been signed or not, a lot of states looking to see what will happen with the state of Louisiana.
Lisa Mara and Maria Schreiner, thank you so very much for being with us.
MSNBC is the source. So as this one lady was saying here, that is law in all of the 50 states. You are not supposed to take the life of another human. You will be arrested for murder. It's in the 10 Commandments, in the Bible. As I said to someone on the channel earlier today, in response to their comment, God said, not Moses. God told somebody. They didn't make it up. So it's all about what you believe and what you don't believe. So you hear this woman also saying it shouldn't be in the context of what Moses said, but that's the whole point. You really can't have one without the other, but I understand her point. You put up the commandments, but then you're not supposed to take it further to start talking about what Moses said, what Job said. So some people are going to say, well, what's the difference? God told this person, these people, these things. They wrote it down on the scroll. It is what it is. It's been around for thousands of years. Obviously, man felt the need to implicate some of these commandments into law. And that's the point I was trying to make to somebody who was commenting. It's not man's law. He made it into a law, but it's originally from God, not man. There's a difference. Should the 10 Commandments be allowed in the state of Louisiana's public schools and also universities? I didn't catch that part. Universities as well. And also, should it be implemented in all United States classrooms? Are they trying to go back to the old days where you got a little bit of the Bible in school? Naturally, many people do not believe in Jesus, God, and the Holy Spirit. Don't believe in Allah, the Jewish faith, so on and so forth. You can tell us your opinion. As I've told many people, I don't argue the Bible with anybody, because if I need to argue with it, then there's something wrong with me. And I am not about to second guess Queen. I can tell you this much. Man didn't create the earth. And if you think he did, there's something wrong with you. Because he didn't create this. You take away everything modern. Car, building, structure. Man did not create a tree. Okay? He didn't create the ocean, a river, ravine. He did not do that. So who did that? I think it's self-explanatory. And a monkey didn't do it. An animal did not do it. What says you, the chat? Did they vote correctly in Louisiana to have 10 Commandments posted in the schoolhouses and also universities? Most children don't pay attention to nothing that go on in school anyway. So let's go there. With all the craziness that goes on in schools, violence in schools, children coming to school wayward, bringing weapons, fighting, fussing, they're not even paying attention to the school lesson. Let's keep it real. They don't even pay attention to the teacher. They don't pay attention to the lesson. You have it to where now they don't want you having your phones in class. Yeah, that's what I'm saying, because they don't pay attention. So if they won't pay attention to the school lesson, the teacher, you think they care about a poster board that says thou shalt not kill, thou shalt not covet and do this and that? Hell no, they don't care. They probably have parents at home that are telling them, trying to teach them the ways of the world and biblical scriptures, and they ain't listening to that. So you think they're listening once they get to school? No, they're not. And I think it's obvious from all the crazy nonsense you see that goes on in the schoolhouse. The children are coming to school wayward, jacked up for whatever reason. So trust me, most of them don't give a damn about nothing going on in the school. All they care about is yappy, 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 talking back, bullying, and when the fuck it's time to eat lunch. Now, you have some kids who actually have their mind on their school books. They're going there to learn. But a lot of children are not going to school to learn. So trust me, for those who are going to school not trying to learn, they could care less about the 10 Commandments on a poster board. I'm just keeping it real. Let's get some more content pertaining to this 10 Commandments. ACLU says they're going to sue. Well, good luck with that. This is the Bible Belt, honey. This is the Bible Belt. News Nation. Which version of the 10 Commandments do Louisiana schools want? This is Mr. Cuomo. Well, we'll find out. Lordy, 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 what a mess.
I'm going to be Mr. Hand, and you're going to be Spicoli.
Bill O'Reilly.
Okay, Fast Times at Ridgemont High. So, in 2005, no, you're Spicoli, believe me. 2005 Supreme Court Rule 5-4 that you could have a display of the 10 Commandments at the Texas State Capitol in Austin. They did that because it was, in their opinion, the 5 justices that ruled they could have it, a passive display. Right? It was simply there to show people that part of our culture, not the entire culture, right, was based on the commandments that Moses brought down from Mount Sinai. And Professor Dershowitz left out that Moses is in the Supreme Court too. So he is a religious figure. No, so there is no question, and he didn't say Moses. He said the law.
Yeah. Go ahead. He said Moses and the lawgivers. But go ahead. He did.
No, he didn't. But okay. So anyway, I wrote about this in Killing the Witches, which your wife took from you, so you didn't read it. And this all goes back, and this is what the Supreme Court will rule on, okay? It's history. It's history. So Patrick Henry and Roger Sherman from Connecticut wanted the United States to be a Christian nation. They wanted it defined in the Constitution. Benjamin Franklin, James Madison, and Thomas Jefferson did not. There was a massive brawl over this in Philadelphia. I mean, chairs flying, and it was really intense. But the Madison crew won. There was a quote floating around for years that Madison wanted the 10 Commandments to be the basis of U.S. law. That quote was phony. It was an amazing story. Look it up. But it got traction. Madison never said that. What is true and what is historical is that we are a country founded on Judeo, I say it differently than Dershowitz, Christian philosophy. And if you look at the 10 Commandments, excluding the part about the deity, you'll see that rule of law, individual rights, personal responsibility is behind all of the dictums. And the Founding Fathers knew that. So they didn't object to any kind of display of the 10 Commandments. Now, Louisiana, you're right, Cuomo, and that hurts me to say, that this will become a partisan issue, because neither side really wants the truth. If the Louisiana public schools display the 10 Commandments, they absolutely have a responsibility to their students to explain it in a historical context.
Yeah.
All right?
I think it's going to fail the test. They laid out a test with the 2 main cases here. The Texas State one was a stand away because Breyer was persuaded by the fact that it was part of a diverse show.
of different views of morality and presentations over time. So it was basically an exhibit in what was seen as not just an inculcation of a specific faith. This seems to be precisely an inculcation of a specific faith, and had the Louisiana state legislature, Christianity.
What faith did they? Wait. The Ten Commandments emanated from Moses, the Jewish faith.
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
And
So
if
what
they
faith are they promoting?
Oh, Bill, give it a rest
and
there.
if they had assigned
Well, what
a
happened to the
curriculum to it,
Jews?
if they had assigned a curriculum to it, they'd be in much better shape. If they had said, we are doing this, as you put it, a philosophical enterprise, they'd be okay. But that's not what this is about for them. This is the same thing they did in Alabama with Roy Moore. And I think they're going to wind up in the same exact place. But politically, I think it's a win.
It's not the same as Moore, because Moore was just right out there saying we want to impose Christian nationalism, the way you put it.
Crystal.
He wanted the Ten Commandments in the Supreme Court. He wanted the Ten Commandments on
And
his
he wanted everybody. He wanted everybody in Alabama to be a Christian nationalist. That's what Moore wanted. I don't know how Louisiana's going to handle it. I know the governor's a smart man. I think when it will be challenged, of course, that the lawyers for the state will come out and say,
I am the Lord thy God. Number 1. Thou shalt have no other gods before me. Number 2. Thou shalt not make to thyself any graven images. Number 3. Thou shalt not take the name of the Lord thy God in vain. Number 4. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy.
this is an educational, historical thing.
1 second.
And I believe the Supreme Court rules
Step on the
6-3
brakes.
on that basis that you are allowed to have it.
Thou shalt not covet
Schools do.
thy neighbor's wife, nor his manservant or his maidservant, nor his cattle, nor anything that is thy neighbor's. Just reading you what's on the screen.
Not promote a specific religion. You just
Hello, darling.
ignore the Jewish factor in all of this. I don't know why, because the Jewish people are basically believing in the Ten Commandments as well. So that if you say it's an imposition of religion, what religion?
Hey, thank you for watching.
That was Mr. Bill O'Reilly. Whew, he's aged a bit. So I see some of your comments in the chat pertaining to other religions, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, well, you'll have to take it up with Supreme Court. That's the point. Allegedly, this country was built on Christianity, but we know that really that's a farce due to the fact that these people came from Europe running from their own religious situations they did not like. They went to Africa, stole slaves, which is wrong, worked these people, my ancestors, for nothing. You move the Indians, Native Americans off the land who were here first. So many will say it's a joke anyway. You're entitled to your opinion. That it's a joke, regardless, because you didn't abide by true Christianity. And I think we know that that is true. So that's why some people don't care about what goes on in America as far as voting, the laws, the Bible. You know, some may believe in the Bible, but they don't really care for what we call American laws because of how the country came to be. The country came here fraudulently, and it did. And it did. Some may not want to hear it, but it's just the truth. This is a fraudulent country. It is fraudulent. But me as an African-American female, I can say I don't want to be anywhere else. Racism or not, bias or not, jacked up problems or not, I'm here. And I own the right to be here. And I'm a real citizen. I have a real birth certificate. I have a real ID, driver's license, and a real social security number. And that's the point of living. You're not going to always agree with what happened in your country many scores ago. But you do have people here, especially a lot of African-American people, who could give two fucks about what America's talking about. We're just keeping it real. And white people too. Hispanic people, other nationalities. Because a lot of people feel like the country was built fraudulently, and that even with this situation with the Ten Commandments, it's fraudulent. I get it. So I weigh both sides. But as some people are saying, you know, ACLU is probably going to be a problem. They're going to sue Louisiana for what has now become law. But what people don't seem to understand is that whether you believe this or that, you have to think about where you are. See, you're still in a white America. You're also in the Bible Belt. So the Bible Belt and the people who are running the government don't really care about what you think. This is what people need to understand. Because you do have white people who don't adhere to American law. The people who are living off the land and don't want to pay taxes, don't want to adhere to rules, regulations, and they're white. Okay, let me make that clear. There's always going to be somebody that's going to oppose everything. I don't care what it is. Whether you're here, abroad, Europe, UK, Canada, there's always going to be somebody who's going to have a problem with everything. Laws, Christianity, Judaism, all of that. It's always going to be a complaint. That's just the way the world is made. I live here in the Bible Belt, and things are done differently here. That should be obvious to many of you. And some people may feel like we're going backwards with these, you know, LGBTQ laws here in Tennessee. People complaining they don't want to post signs in their restaurant business to say, hey, I've got a cohesive bathroom for straight, gay, transgender. I don't want no problems. And I get that, because in the end, the government's not going to be there for that business owner if some shit pops off. Somebody gets to wanting to fight and talking crazy about a damn bathroom. And that's what our laws, the people who are making the laws don't think about. It's the worst case scenario. But this is the Bible Belt. This is where I live. And things are done differently here. It's obvious. Some of you who don't even know, it's still a law in Georgia that you cannot even have oral sex. That is a law. And some of you are probably thinking, damn, Queen, what? Yes. It is against the law to put your mouth on a person's private part in the state of Georgia. That's what I'm trying to make you understand. This is the Bible Belt. That's why it was said Bible and Belt. Because below a certain part of the United States, which is the South, they navigate differently. And I haven't heard anybody say, hey, we're going to take that oral sex law off the book. That's not right. Everybody knows that down here in the South, you still have states with the death penalty. You still have states with really whack-ass laws. It's just the way it is. It does not mean that it's right. It's just the way that it is. We navigate differently. I'm not trying to claim politicians, but the point I'm trying to make is that this is just the way it's been from the moment that the people came over on the boat and claimed this land. That's what people need to understand. Because a lot of people do not like to go back in history. Oh, I don't got nothing to do with what my ancestors did. I didn't bring the slaves here, but you need to understand. It's the same mentality. It's the very reason why people don't get along. I don't walk around worrying about an Arab, a Jew, a Muslim, an Asian. I don't have that kind of time. I have too much on my plate, which is called surviving. I don't walk out the door looking at an Asian a certain way. I don't look at a Mexican a certain way. I don't look at nobody. So I don't care. I don't waste my time on foolishness. But there's people who do. That's why the country is so jacked up. Because we got everybody here with all these crazy, whack-ass ways of thinking and navigating. It's the reason why we as people can't get along. But this is the Bible Belt. Louisiana is near the bottom of the state. This is their law. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree. But it is their law. What is going to become of this new Louisiana law? As I said before, the children are wayward today. Just keeping it real. And they don't pay attention to nothing. Anything, excuse me, proper English. Anything. So you could post 5,000 posters in one school. They will walk right by that poster as if it was white paint. Keep it moving. And that's what people need to understand. And it's not to be disrespectful to the law or it being in the Bible. The point I'm trying to make is that children have ADHD. They have problems. They come to school to get away from shit from home. They're not going to probably care. You'll probably have an only small percentage, 1%, of somebody that's going to care about that poster and or object to the poster. And that's just the way it is. These children are wayward today. And like I said, if they can't focus on school lessons, obeying the rules in the schoolhouse, you think they really give a damn about the 10 Commandments on the wall? No, they don't. That's just the way it is. Just like the children aren't going to care, the staff aren't going to care, people in society aren't going to care. Because think about what you're saying. You have rules, laws in every 50 states. Who is really listening to the laws? It's the same thing. You know what you're not supposed to do, but you do it anyway for whatever reason. It's the same thing. You know you're not supposed to steal. You know you're not supposed to covet. You know you're not supposed to, you know what I'm saying, assault people, but you do. That's my point. People do what they want. Well, Gio, it might. I'm assuming that it would. But as I'm trying to explain to people is that people navigate differently here in the South. That's my point. You don't have to like it. You don't have to agree. But this is the South, and people here navigate differently. Hypocritically or not, people navigate different. This is the dirty South. It's always been the dirty South. It's going to continue to stay. You're talking about hundreds of years of people migrating from Europe and setting here on American soil. And you still have racism. You still have biasness. That's my point. People are still ignorant. People are still nasty. People are, racist, homophobic, whatever. Don't even matter what the damn topic is. It's just the way it is. And you can't change people. And I'm one of them kind of people, I don't believe in arguing about religion, politics. Many of you will see that. I've been very leery about posting anything politically because I don't like arguing with people about a fucking title. It's a waste of time. You're human before you are black, before you're white, before you're Democrat, before you're Republican. And that's what some of you don't seem to understand. You're always grouping people in a group. And I don't get down with that bullshit. Because for every person that throws a dagger at a liberal, at a Republican, they're all tainted. And a lot of people can't see that. They will ride or die for a motherfucker when they know they're not right. It's the same thing with true crime. It's the same thing. You know they're not right, but you'll ride or die for them anyway. Whether they're black, white, Republican, whatever. You know they ain't right. You know what they're doing ain't right, but you upholding them. That's where I have the problem. At some point, you have to stand account as a human being. Whether you are black, white, Mexican, Jew, Arab, Muslim, Republican, Democrat, own your shit. And some of you refuse to own your shit. And you ride or die for people because, oh, they're like me. Well, he's black, he like me. He's white, he like me. She like me. He's a Republican, he like me. No, ma'am. No, ma'am. Right is right, wrong is wrong. Even a crook will tell you, yeah, I know I shouldn't have been doing that. Yeah, I know I was wrong. Wrong is wrong. Scratch the titles and call a spade a spade. That's my commentary. I wanted to put in this title, but I decided I changed my mind from last night's live. I told Regina I was going to talk about sex education. Wanted to talk about that, but I didn't put it in the title. I decided to put this other title in with the gun laws. So how do you feel about the abusers? If a man or woman has a restraining order, he or she cannot carry a gun in the United States of America. I still have a problem with this law, and I feel like it's going to be a stipulation. I should have read more, but I did finally here in this live stream. That's still a problem to me, because there are other people out here who have committed crimes against people domestically, but no restraining order has been issued. So this is still a problem. And people are just gun happy today. Get mad, go get a gun. Show off, go get a gun. Children getting guns. Children finding guns in the house, digging around, going in mommy's room, daddy's room, dresser drawer, nightstand, under the bed. They're just people who don't have any business with guns, point blank. And we also know that even if there were no guns, man would find a way to exact a crime without a gun. He would do it with his fists, his hands, a knife, a bat. It doesn't matter. But this law needs to be revamped. It needs to be anybody who has exacted a crime of violence against a said person, such as battery, kidnapping, torture, he or she cannot possess a weapon. Because just stipulating restraining orders, that's not good enough. It's not good enough. And yes, as I said earlier, this country has a serious gun problem. People have access to guns, finding guns, stealing guns, and it is what it is. People hold gun shows, so there's no criteria at a gun show. Set up a booth, put your gun on the table, somebody comes by, buys the gun. There's no background check, criminal check, ID check, nothing. Here, take the gun, give me the money, boom, transaction over with. That's the problem we have. Well, Ellen, as I said, that Supreme Court law, it has problems as well, because it's only stipulating if you have a restraining order against you, you can't have access to a gun. And as I just said, it's no different than me talking about this 10 Commandments law. Who's going to listen to it? Because people are going to do what they want. So it's not going to really matter. It sounds good on paper, of course. But if you are determined to go find a gun, buy a gun some type of way, you will go get one. If you have to ask somebody to buy it for you. Even though that would be stupid, put your name on a gun and then give it to somebody and sell it to them after you've bought it, or you go take their money and buy it. It's still your name on the gun. That's foolish. But somebody would foolishly do it. That goes back to what I just was saying about upholding people in their wrongdoing. We have been doing this since day one. Man, woman upholds people in the wrongdoing. We've all done it. You know you've upheld somebody in the wrongdoing. Nobody can sit here today and say, oh, I have never upheld somebody that was doing wrong. I don't believe it. I don't care what it is. That's my commentary, everybody. I'll be back on later to discuss Sebastian Rogers' case pertaining to Faith. Was she the reason that this child was possibly eliminated? And also Tony Mathis' question to law enforcement. Where are you in the investigation? Are you in a better place with answers to the disappearance of Sebastian Rogers, or no? Well, Vivian, I didn't know. Because I don't go to gun shows, but I didn't think there was many regulations about, because these are vendors, private vendors. So how would a private vendor be able to check your background at a gun show? You set up a booth to sell your merchandise. So how would a private person have access to do a background check to buy to sell a gun to you? I don't think they would have access to do that. So you want me to believe that every gun show in America, the people have access to look you up to see if you're a felon or not, to sell you a gun? That's all I'm saying. And who's going to be standing over somebody to regulate that with 1,000 people or more sitting up with guns? That's all I'm saying. Somebody has to regulate it at that event. Yeah, Ellie, I don't believe that. You're talking about 50 states. I just refuse to believe at gun shows somebody is sitting here tallying up every person with a fucking booth to make sure they have access to run a check on every person that comes up and wants to buy a gun from them. I don't see how that would happen. I don't see that. Because who's going to be the person to stand there over you at every fucking booth? Person selling the guns. Come on now. Thank you for you all's time. It's a 2-part live. Domestic abusers with restraining orders cannot own a gun. That is the new law passed down by the Supreme Court. Second part of this conversation is pertaining to the 10 Commandments. They will now be posted in public schools and universities in the state of Louisiana. That is the said information. If you'd like to donate to this great network, $Beganji129 Cash App. Stickers and chats are always welcome during the live stream. Also, I'd like to talk to you all about sex education. I will put up a poll here shortly. Please weigh in if you believe sex education should be taught in public and or private schools. That's my commentary. You all have a wonderful weekend. I'll be back a little bit later to finish my conversation pertaining to the motives of unaliving Sebastian Rogers by the Proudfoots. We're going to take a deep dive into this girl, Faith, what she's seen, what she's heard, how she's being treated, how Nina's feeling, what was the real motive for this child being gone, and the evidence by Sumner County Sheriff's Department. What do you all have at this moment pertaining to the disappearance of Sebastian Rogers? Are you in a better place with information today versus 4 months ago? Thank you for your time. You've been listening to the Vault XL.